I want to reiterate that my position in a Trump-Clinton election is strategic non-voting, followed by mass civil disobedience. What I'm suggesting is that Hillary is not a lesser evil. That does not somehow imply support for Trump. I may say that, I might look at it rationally and work it through and say, you know, what I'm trying to say is that I might actually develop the argument, right? To simply state that Hillary is not a lesser evil is one thing, but to actually attempt to demonstrate it is another. Okay, but arguing that Hillary is not worse than Trump, or sorry, I stated that wrong. Arguing that Hillary is not better than Trump does not somehow imply support for Trump. Okay? What it implies is that they're both equally terrible. Okay? So I'm looking at Trump and I'm saying Trump is terrible, and then I'm trying to argue that she's equally terrible. And therefore you should not vote for either of them. I know that maybe that's a little bit outside of the rubric. That's not the kind of argument that you expect. Okay? But because we're used to this lesser evil arguments for so long, and so much of our voting patterns is based on this voting for a lesser evil, that's the argument that I need to make to try to convince you not to vote. And convincing you not to vote is important because that's the only way that we can. I mean, if we end up with an election that's that bad, okay, where you're dealing with a situation, where the outcome is so inconsequential, the only way that you can send a message is to not take part. It's a charade, okay? Just don't bother. And that's really undoing a lot of layers of propaganda, right? The number one lie that lets a society exist intact is the idea that you can change something through the system. The system is designed to prevent you from being able to change anything, right? So as an anarchist, and I've tried to get this idea across that I am an anarchist. You know, a big part of what I'm trying to argue and convince you of is that you can't change anything through a system. You can at best, make little tweaks. The kind of thing that Sanders has done is the best that you can do, right? That doesn't mean you shouldn't support somebody like Sanders. It means that you have to understand, like before you start, that that this is impossible, right? The best you can do is use that to as a launching pad for something bigger, right? And I mean the establishment politicians understand that. That's why they're telling him to stop, because they know that he's starting something that's going to be hard to take down, right? And he's creating something that is inherently outside of it. And I think he knows that too. I mean, this idea that he's working within the Democratic Party. I mean, he spent, 30 years outside the Democratic Party, and then all of a sudden, hey, I'm a Democrat. I mean, Clinton is right to point that out and say he's not a Democrat. He's not. And that's why he's exciting, because he's not. But at the same time, it means that his ideas are inherently outside of the Democratic Party. And the idea that these ideas could ever exist within the Democratic Party is, you're dreaming, right? These ideas are not ever to really be taken seriously within that rubric. They can only be taken seriously when you start thinking in terms of extra parties, or maybe in terms of revolutionary politics, right? And that's why support for Sanders is important and interesting. I think we've gone far enough through the process that we can drop the charade. I mean, Sanders is not going to win, right? The question is, what is he going to do next? Is he going to launch an independent bid? Is he going to maybe go on a ticket with Jill Stein, etc., right? Everything that he's been doing from the start, and everything he will do in the future, is outside of the Democratic Party. He's just using that as a vehicle to draw attention to himself. And give him credit for that. It's been very smart. But I mean, this idea that the Democrats would ever do any of this, it's insane, right? So I am actively trying to convince you not to vote. And when I actively try to convince you not to vote, the way to do that is to tear Hillary down to the same level that Trump is at. But that does not mean I'm supporting Trump in any way at all. Okay? It means I'm trying to pull her down to the same horrible point that Trump is at. Okay? And I think that I'm justified in doing that. Okay? It's not just rhetoric. Okay? That's the whole point, is that it's not just rhetoric. She really is that bad. She really will start multiple wars. Okay? And with the way the world is right now, that means World War III. Okay? If she hasn't already started World War III in Libya, you can expect that Hillary Clinton will almost certainly start World War III. Okay? It's not rhetoric. It's not propaganda. It's not outlandishness. It is actual reality. And that's what you're looking at. I know that you want to think that the Democrats will start World War III. I know that you want to think that the Republicans will start World War III. In actual fact, why don't you look at the other world wars? Okay, because Woodrow Wilson wasn't a Republican, and neither was Franklin Roosevelt. Okay? Which is not to compare her to either of them. I think a better comparison is to Richard Nixon. Okay? So, let's put all of these things in context. Okay? The idea of allowing her to win the presidency is scary. And she does need to be taken down to the same base level that Trump is at, because that's what you're going to get. Okay? 8 years ago, I didn't see that. Okay? And I was able to see that Obama was running to her right, and that it was pretty clear that Obama was the establishment candidate, and Clinton had been pushed out. Okay? I wasn't able to see the wisdom in that. And 8 years later, I think it's clear that that was the right choice, was to keep her out. And Obama may have been a middle-of-the-road conservative, but he wasn't a maniac. And we should, the world should give a toast to Goldman Sachs for having the foresight. As they mutter under their breath, you idiots, why are you supporting Ted Cruz? Okay? They got it right 8 years ago. They're badly fucking it up right now. Okay? You want the right kind of thinking? If it's Trump versus Clinton, the Spanish anarchists in the 30s were faced with a choice between a Hitler-backed government and a Stalin-backed government. Ukraine was faced with the same choice as well. Ukraine actually picked Hitler over Stalin. And we see the consequences of that. It still exists today. It's very easy to condemn Ukraine for picking Hitler. But it's maybe easy to forget that, a couple of years before they sided with Hitler, Stalin had launched a genocide against them today we call it the Holodomor. And it was an actual genocide on the same level as the Holocaust. Okay? It was against Ukrainians. That's got to be the worst choice in the history of the world. You can align with Hitler or you can align with Stalin. Okay? But a lot of people had to make that choice in the 1930s. The Ukrainians had to make it, and the Spanish anarchists had to make it. Okay? Let's talk about the Spanish anarchists. They picked Stalin. And what did Stalin do? He killed them by the thousands. Slaughtered them. Massacres. Okay? But, at the time, all objective evidence would have suggested that Stalin was the lesser evil. Is that outrageous? I don't think it is, okay? And that's what I'm arguing here, is that we're in a situation where this logic of a lesser evil that we've had for all of these years and all of these elections, it has now collapsed. Okay? And it happens slowly, incrementally. That's why you don't see it. Had you been standing in 1975 and looking at Trump versus Clinton, you would see it immediately. But because we've had these incremental or narrowings. Okay, it's led us to this situation where we can't see it. Okay, but that's what we're stuck with here. It's two equally sized and equally unacceptable evils. Okay, and both of which necessitate immediate fighting back, immediate revolutionary action. Okay, if you're arguing that you should vote for Clinton to stop Trump, you are back to trying to argue that Stalin is preferable to Hitler. That's the argument that I'm making. It's, maybe I need to use slightly egregious language to get the point across, okay? But that's what I'm trying to say. And you know what? That's exactly what Sanders has been saying. He's right. It's not just empty rhetoric. Okay? The specter of a Clinton presidency is no more acceptable than that of a Trump presidency. There needs to be a stronger reaction than just voting for Clinton and going home. This has to be the breaking point. It has to be the point where we say it's enough, where you have to support a third party, because it's not going to be better under Clinton than it is under Trump. If it's Trump versus Clinton, I'm going to vote for a general strike. Now, you might want to go back to the 2000 election and say, look at at Ralph Nader, and blame him for it, and it's Ralph Nader's fault that Gore lost and Bush won. Most people look at that and they say, well, people that voted for Nader wouldn't have voted for either of them anyways, so it's not actually true. That's probably accurate, but that's not the argument that I'm going to make. I'm going to make the argument that everybody knows is true, but no one will say, and that's that Gore would have been every bit as bad as Bush. He would have done exactly the same thing. It wouldn't have made a damn bit of difference. Okay? That's what you don't want to hear, but you know is true. And so I'm not swayed by this. I'm sorry. A little while back I asked the question of if Hillary could beat Donald Trump with evangelicals, or Donald Trump could flip Illinois or Michigan or Pennsylvania. That was yesterday morning. So some polls come up today that seem to answer those questions. And I just want to point out that polling for general election matchups right now is very preliminary. My questions do remain hypothetical, but I'd be interested to see some polling of a three-way race: Sanders, Trump, and Clinton. If we consider that Sanders is beating Trump by 20 points in multiple key swing states, how much of that goes to Clinton if she runs? And that language was chosen consciously. I'm just wondering if something like this is reasonable. Somewhere like Michigan, you might have Sanders with 40, Trump with 35, and Clinton with 25. Is that a reasonable thought, if the three of them were to run together? The idea being that Sanders would pull a lot of voters that would be maybe inclined towards leaning to the right today, whereas Clinton would pull a lot of Republicans, right? Or moderate Republicans, upper class moderate Republicans. And you see Clinton becoming the party of the upper class, and the rest kind of fighting over it, right? Sanders and Trump fighting over the rest, right? The flip is that Clinton could beat Trump with evangelicals, opening up weird results like the following: somewhere like Missouri, where Clinton, Sanders, and Trump crews both split. As Missouri tends to split general elections, let's give them each 25%. You could end up with something like Clinton with 40, Trump with 35, and Sanders with 25. So, the commonality is Trump is running around 35, but Clinton and Sanders have flipped. And the thinking might be that the way to beat Trump more coherently or more cohesively might be to run both Clinton and Sanders, because they can beat Trump on different ends in different states. In a state like Michigan, Clinton might have a hard time beating Trump with the working class voters, but Sanders can beat Trump with those same voters. So you want to run Sanders in Michigan. Whereas in a state like Missouri, Sanders might have a harder time because you have all these evangelicals. Clinton might do better with the evangelicals than Sanders would, so you'd rather run Clinton in Missouri. But this is just Democratic Party strategizing, right? I need to be clear that I'm not proposing that I advocate this or that I would want this. I'm just approaching this like it's a math problem. Okay, not like it's a horse race or, like I'm cheering for one side. I'm approaching it like it's a math problem because that's what's interesting to me. That said, I would not advise taking any of this seriously until at least Labor Day. I mean, it's a long ways away, but a little bit of introductory polling may be useful for everybody. These sorts of things, if all three candidates run, you might see something like that. I just have a hard time accepting the idea that Sanders is doing this to stop. I don't expect Sanders to give up. Sorry. Like he's gone all this way. If he doesn't get the Democratic nomination, I kind of expect him to run as an independent. I mean, of course, unless Hillary decides she's going to accept the $15 minimum wage and, free state tuition and what were the other things we said? Universal health care, right? I mean, hell will freeze over before she accepts even one of those things. She'll be sitting, yeah, sure, Bernie, as she's signing the TPP, right? I mean, like, listening to him say, I mean, the media picked up on it. I mean, he was obviously being sardonic, right? Yeah, I'll support Clinton if she accepts this list of things that she'll never accept, implying that he's never going to support Clinton, right? I mean, meaning that the question is really, is he going to run as an independent, or is he just going to kind of back off, right? He won't actively campaign for her. He might decide to just kind of fade into the shadows, which might be hard to do. This is one of those toothpaste things, right? It's kind of hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube. So I think that these kinds of polling ideas need to be contemplated. It's just hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube with Sanders, and that's a good thing. But it means some polling on the hypothetical is useful. And Clinton has already tried to appeal to the Christian conservative vote, which there is quite a bit of in the Democratic Party base. She's a politician. She'll do what she thinks she needs to do to win. If Trump is the nominee, and he is, then it opens up a vacuum on the Christian right that she will pounce on, and the gays get thrown under the bus. Okay, the Christian right is a far larger and far more stable voting bloc to integrate into her base of Southern conservative minorities. She's winning because she's got all these conservatives in the South that are voting for her. She could maybe even win some of those states. Okay, I know that what I'm saying is going to upset or confuse some people, but you simply haven't been paying attention. This is precisely why she creates such a horrible reaction in the left-wing grassroots. She'd sell her own husband down the creek for the right endorsement, and all the smart people fully grasp that. That's another thing to watch for in the election. If Bill becomes a liability somehow, she will cut the rope like that. Bye, Bill. She might even start to run as Hillary Rodham. She will do that sort of thing, okay? I mean, it's if I was Hillary Clinton, I may not be particularly attached to Bill Clinton. In fact, there's an argument that the only reason that she holds on to Bill Clinton is because he's useful, right? And if he's not useful anymore, he's gone. That's something to watch for in the campaign. So this logic that you're voting for her to stop the Christian right? No. You don't understand. Hillary Christian is the Christian right. And if Trump wins, and he will, that's going to be a big aspect of the election. She won't beat him with working class whites. It is her best strategy to run on the right on social issues, specifically. That's what's going to happen. Wait for it.